I don't know. I wonder if it was like the Power Rangers theme when I was 5 that planted the seed or something, because my family has no background in this stuff. I think just when I was, I always had this idea that electric guitars were sweet and stuff like that before I even knew anything about music, and I just eventually got into like classic rock stuff, Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, AC/DC, and then into Black Sabbath, which from there led pretty much chronologically through the rest of heavy metal, where I went from there into like Maiden and Priest, into Metallica, Megadeth, and Slayer, into fucking the whole cornucopia of extreme shit that comes after that. And that was sort of how it went. Very happy with that, though, because going sort of chronologically from like rock, early, like from classic rock music into like hard rock, into early heavy metal, into extreme metal, you can really see, listening to the record, sort of how the ideas all evolve. And so because of that, I think it's helped me as a writer kind of like place ourselves in there, like where we want to be in the spectrum of rock and heavy metal, Well, there's no way in hell I could play the drums. I'm kind of clumsy and uncoordinated physically, so that's probably a lot to do with it, honestly. But there's kind of a funny story here where I bought a guitar. Actually, I saw a couple of bands live. I saw Black Sabbath, I saw Iron Maiden, and I saw Metal Church, all kind of in the span of a couple years. And at this point, I kept thinking, like, man, I want to be up there doing that. That's kind of was my spark for, I gotta start a band. I was listening to more and more and more of this music, and I just had to do it. I had no musical background whatsoever, so I bought a guitar, and it was a really shitty one. And I didn't even know how to tune it, but I learned like 4 or 5 riffs and played them all. It's mega suck status, and I had the thing for like a month before I met Victor Mikalcevic, through which I met John Locks, these were the early Warbringer guitar players, and because of that, we have 2 guitar players that have been playing quite a bit longer than me and suck way less. So because of that, I was like, well, I'm not going to buy another instrument. I'm just going to be the vocalist. And that kind of led me to it. And I had no experience with that. It wasn't pretty at first, but kind of over time, I wasn't afraid. I wasn't afraid to be loud and proud about it. So over time, I developed the style I now have. And, it was a lot of fun, kind of a challenge to sort of out of nowhere come up with a vocal style and try to make it work, but it did, I guess, and it's kind of a cool way to end up in it sort of by accident. No, there really weren't. There wasn't a lot of like local metal shows I was aware of, at least, going on. I grew up in Moore Park, California, which is in Ventura County. It's pretty suburban. There wasn't like a ton of metal people there or anything. I didn't know any other like metalheads at my school. I was the only one really. So it was like people from neighboring schools that were my early band members. I would go to like neighboring towns and stuff. The only local bands I really knew of when we were starting, there was, at the time we started, there was also the same time bands like Merciless Death and Fueled by Fire were starting up, and so we would go to each other's shows and stuff at the early stages, and I think that also helped move us in like a more thrash metal direction, because we were playing more like this amalgamation of like speed, power, thrash at first, because we just liked all kinds of fucking metal, we didn't really pick and choose. But I think the thrash style works best for my vocals anyway, and that's the way that we were kind of developing. We were kind of listening to more and more extreme stuff, whether thrash or like death or black metal, and so it made sense, and we started to just try to play faster and meaner because of that. So I think those bands inspired us to be have a little less of the pretty melodic stuff, and just be more vicious, kind of, and play more fast. Oh shit! I haven't been out to enough shows to know. I'm too much of a hermit. So there's none I know of, but that doesn't mean that they're not out there, and I'm probably just getting older and out of touch. It's funny though, I used to be very out at shows all the time, and now I'm very like inward and into pretty much what we're doing. Like, and like this last record, I was just focusing on that exclusively, and in a lot of my metal listenership too, like for the whole time we're doing that, I was just going back and like studying our own records and being like, what do we do right, what do we not do right, And so it's kind of full circle because at first, War Without End especially is like kind of a conglomeration of all of our favorite thrash influences. And then I think now we've had enough records that we get to be influenced by ourselves, and we get to say, like, what did we do right here? What did we not do right here? What would we have done differently here? And do that. So it's funny how that works, I guess. Yeah, in general too, just because I'm I'm about to be married, and so I don't listen to as much like brutal metal at home and stuff, because that's not my fiance's like number one interest or anything. But on tour, I get to live that side of myself a lot more still. So it's kind of funny because when I'm at home, I'll be like just reading and super quiet and not really go to shows at all. And then on tour, I'm at a show every day of my life. So I get to, I guess, express polar opposite sides of myself in my life, and it actually worked well for me, and I feel rather balanced because of it. She's into music, and yeah, usually she pretty much leaves on whatever. I introduced her into a lot of metal. When we first met, it was very important to me that she at least have some understanding. She has to know like who the fuck like Judas Priest is and Iron Maiden and like why they're good, and okay, Iron Maiden equals gallops and guitar harmonies. Like, you better know that, stuff like that. Or Bathory Records, and certain stuff she really latched on to, actually. Oddly enough, Burzum Philosophum is something I keep hearing her putting on randomly, which is not one I would have expected. She doesn't seem to like the aggressive like machine gun thrash and death stuff as much, and seems to gravitate more towards the like atmospheric evil black metal, and then the old like classic more like rock leaning heavy metal stuff, Iron Maiden and before kind of stuff. Who'd have thought? Yeah, it's interesting though. Because, like, my previous relationship, I've had, like, one other big one in my life, was into metal. Now I'm not, and it's not really that big of a deal. A lot of people in the metal community have this idea, like, you need to only associate with people who are into that with you. It's like, no, you can just treat it as, like, well, hey, I'm into this music, and, hey, if you want to check it out, you can. Like, it's pretty cool, But I don't... Miley, she's into a lot of different music, a lot of like old hippie music, honestly, but a lot of that stuff I like too, and I'm into a lot of just like, old surf rock when we're on a beach day, or when we go to the forest, we'll listen to some like Renaissance-y sounding stuff, and a lot more. It's funny because when I was younger, I was much more like very meticulous about my music taste. Now I'm like, I like music, It's funny how that evolution went, and perhaps I'm less less good with my like metal trivia encyclopedia stuff, because I'm one of those people that remembers a lot of random facts and details, like what year what thrash album was released. I used to be pretty good at that stuff, and now I just don't care as much, and I just care about like it's funny, I just don't care as much. I guess maybe years of touring has exhausted me on that kind of stuff, and when people ask me like what are my favorite albums of this or something, it's like, man, I've answered that question, those kind of questions so many times that it's like I still like this, I still care about it. I'm not ever gonna be and I say this with seriousness, I'm not ever gonna be one of those people that plays heavy metal and is like, I don't like heavy metal, like the dude from Mastodon or something. Don't fucking play heavy metal if you don't like it. You should, it's really artistically dishonest, isn't it? You should play music you like, right? I can't. He's not the only dude, but there's this attitude within certain parts of the metal community, metal musicians, that to be too cool for this kind of stuff, or like, look down on most of it as if it's... Yeah, but if you're like the owner of the Cheesecake Factory, you probably just gotta deal with it, that's your fucking business, And same, like, I'm in a band called Warbringer, so what am I gonna do? Be like, decide that, I'm sick of that, I don't want to play violent, aggressive music anymore. No, like, that's what I set out to do, and you know what? It's worth doing. It's not just some stupid bullshit. It's not a thing to grow out of. It's legitimate music. So that's how I see it. And I think heavy metal has that artistic credibility to it that can make real works that approach subjects and feelings that other styles of music can't. And that's the thing about metal, is its aim as music is fundamentally different than other music. And that's why I think there's such a separation between people that are into heavy metal and many other types of music, Well, I guess so. Coveted chance to play a war zone. Like, that's something people would try to do. No, I mean, we did actually once. We played Bangkok when there was an uprising in the city, and there was actually. No like large scale warfare because they don't tend to have concerts in those circumstances, but they did have the downtown of the city was on fire. They had like a crackdown where something like 60, 70 protesters were shot, and like there was a group that was trying to overthrow the government. It was kind of like if downtown, but Bangkok's a huge city, so it's kind of like if downtown LA was barricaded off and on fire, and the rest of the city was just like still going on. Yeah. So we were kind of worried flying in there, but we were in Osaka, Japan when we got this news that this was going on, and our flight was to Bangkok, and then we had a flight from Bangkok to the next show. So we were like, well, we either have to eat a huge financial loss and skip this show and like reroute our flights and deal with all that, because that's fucking expensive to do, and and we don't want to do that, of course. So our choices are, well, do we brave it or do we eat the financial loss? And we're like, well, we want to play the show. We're here to play the show. Let's do it. And we did, and nothing bad happened. It was fine. We played in Juarez, Mexico once, which is a place it's a place of ill repute, and I even walked around at night a little bit. And you know what happened? Nothing. Even in bad places, like for the most part, you're fine. People that like worry about. I remember I saw like some footage where someone was like standing on a corner in LA, like, oh yeah, here I am, like I'm a well-dressed white person standing on the worst corner in LA in broad daylight. Look, nothing's happening, that kind of shit. It's the world's a lot of the be afraid of everywhere. That is the news speaking. There's one shouldn't not be cautious, but for the most part. There's not, cities are there so people can live in them. You're not gonna like catch a bullet just walking down the street in too many places in the world. That you usually have to like get mixed up in something in order to like get shot. Yeah, you have to like be trying to buy drugs or something from the wrong people or whatever. If you just like show up, play the show, do your job, leave, like. It's honestly like nothing terrible has ever happened to me, and I've played over 1,000 concerts in 40-something countries. Enough to where I've lost count, and it's not that hard. Or maybe I've just been lucky. Who knows? Maybe that's why. Maybe I'm just really lucky, and that's why I'm saying it's not that hard to keep safe and keep your nose clean. Yeah, maybe because I've certainly done some pretty stupid shit at certain times, but I've just never been stung too badly by it, I guess. I have 2 battle axes. I don't have any guns. What use do I have for it? Who's gonna rob me? Like, what would they steal from me? Yeah. Well, I live in the city. What would I hunt? Pigeons? My neighbor's cats. I have 3 cats too. Me and my fiance. They're her cats originally, but I love them very much. They're my fluff balls, and they're all stupid and entertaining. It's pretty great. Guns though, like I don't think I have a weird thing with those, because I could tell you a fair amount about firearms, but certainly way more than the average non-gun owner, especially when we get into like historical military hardware. I could tell you a fair amount about that, but I don't really want to own any of it. I have a fascination with this kind of like killing technology, because that's what it is, but I also have a revulsion towards it, because I'm like, well, these are kind of, as far as if you're going to say, like, are guns good technology or evil technology? Well, you know which one. They're not really, like, a good thing, because their only purpose is to destroy stuff. But yet, they're really fascinating and interesting because of that. So, I don't know. And I'm not actually anti-gun ownership for rights either. I'm not against that. I think, I actually believe in the Second Amendment, but I just have my personal choice to not have a gun, because I just figure, well, then if I'm really angry, my like most extreme angry thought will be to get my gun, because I have it. So or fucking whoever's making me mad, but I don't. I don't like to leave myself the option to like kill someone. And if someone's invading my house anyway, like I'm That's really unlikely, given where I live. No one's going to invade my current residence. Maybe if I move into like a higher value property at some point where it's like more on its own and there's more valuable stuff there, I might change my mind. I know my dad, John Kevill Sr., later in his life got all into owning a bunch of guns and stuff, which is a curious change. And I talked to him about that. I don't know what I think. It seems like owning one or something is sane, but when you want like a whole fucking collection of firearms in your house, the people that are all like that, sure, you're free to do it, but why? What's the and another thing too, people who say like, oh yeah, we're gonna use without guns, how do we resist the government? I think one of the real problems of that way of thinking too is some of the firepower that's available to modern armies versus what you can own as a private citizen. That discrepancy is pretty huge. Like, you can own your whatever gun from Walmart or something, but what would you do if the government were to like sick an attack helicopter on you? Sorry, your rifle isn't going to do shit against that, Critically acclaimed, well, I guess it depends which critics you ask, but most of them seem to quite like it. It means that, I guess it just means the album got a good reception, and I'm really proud of this record. People, what means more to me is, do fans really like it? Because sometimes critics are a guy who, like, gets our record on his desk, doesn't care or know about the band, and, here, write this review, then write the next review. So I'm not always the most concerned with those, but I'm really... Yeah, I mostly, whenever we put something out, I look to see what people say about it. Of course, I'm interested. This last record was ultimately 3 years of work or something, more when you count putting the band back together and back together again. So I put so much of myself and my life into it, I can't not look. And sometimes, yeah, it is like, when people don't seem to get it, or when they... when they'll like write it off sometimes. I read a couple reviews of this record, of Woe to the Vanquished, that said, Warbringer pretty much puts out a solid record but takes no risks. And I'm like, did you listen to the record? Did you hear the fucking 11-minute song at the end, or the one before it that's like a Melodeath song? Or, exactly. And I've felt like that since about our second record. If you want to say on our first record, Warbringer is copying the 80s and offering nothing new, well, we were 19, and, there's actually probably some truth to that. But I think we realized that and very quickly address that. We were a very young and new band with like no experience, basically, and I think we had an extremely rapid and distinctive evolution, and I think people still kind of, even to this day, sort of treat us like we're making our first album over and over again, but we really haven't been. And so that's kind of the thing that bothers me most about reviews, is that perception, like Warbringer does this, and then whether we do or don't do that, they say we do, Well, I had a pretty serious period of depression in my life, after the last record, because I lost the band. So the band ceased to exist for a few years, and this had been my entire adult life. I left on my first tour when I had just turned 21, and so it was like everything I'd done my entire, post high school was this band. That's pretty much it, and when I lost it, I kind of lost my whole identity and sense of self, and I had to work a shitty job and fucking move back in at home. My life collapsed, dude. It was bad. And so I ultimately, though, I spent a good year pretty much just feeling awful and sorry for myself and sad, and I can't blame myself for that, really. There's a pretty good reason to be. But I started to just pretty much get more motivated over time. I started weightlifting I had a year or so where I'd do heavy weightlifting, and that actually helped a lot, because I'd be I can lift more weight than I could last week, so I guess that's something, even though I don't have my band that I love and stuff. And I started rebuilding the band too, and it took a while, but just doing that and seeing progress towards this distant goal of releasing this record, and having that goal in mind helped me a lot. And just seeing okay, well, I'm one step closer to that now. This song's coming along. This idea's coming along. And now the record's actually released. So it was a moment of, that's kind of my, yes, I got through that phase of my life. It's done. I'm done being depressed. I also met my my fiance. In a month will be my wife, and that helped a lot. Yeah, that helped a lot too. Just having another person love you helps you love yourself. We take requests. We don't have everything from our now 5 records in the repertoire, but we've mixed it up a bit. When someone shouts something out, if we know it, and we'll throw it in if it seems to make any sense to us. Yeah. I have a few, but Hammerheart, Bathory, that one was always a choice for me because it is literally a funeral hymn, so it's very fitting and glorious. Yeah, thank you. It was fun talking about stuff a little unusual for heavy metal interviews. And, thanks for listening, thanks for watching, and check out the new Warbringer record, Woe to the Vanquished. It'll blow your head off.